Hello, and welcome back to the Projector Stories Podcast. I am Sarah, a 1-3 emotional projector.
I'm Lora. I'm a 5-1 splenic projector.
And in this podcast, we're really kind of going through what's happening with us in our deconditioning journey in live and living color, questioning things, seeing what really works when the rubber hits the road, and just allowing our curiosity and our collective 1156 channel to inform some of our talking points, as well as our collective right-mindedness, which makes it so we never know what we're actually going to say. So, Lora, how
Sarah.
has your past week been? How's your past week been?
Just very busy. We had appliance issues, as you know, the audience doesn't. But did I share in last Mercury retrograde our fridge broke as it does because we have the Mercury retrograde curse in which all of our appliances always break during retrograde. And we got it fixed, but it broke again. So we've just been in the process of replacing it, and that has turned into the process of cleaning out the garage, which is like we're not hoarders. The entire house is not a hoarding house. But if you open the garage door, you would question that statement very scrupulously, because the garage is the place where everything goes once it's used up its purposefulness, and then we're reluctant to get rid of it. So the garage is a bit of a mess and always has been and probably always will be, but we're in the process of getting rid of some stuff and it's just an ordeal. So I'm tired, but that's not like nothing. My mind has been so active slash taken up with life that I haven't had time to process anything human design related. So I don't think I have any pressing matters to bring up. How about you, Sarah? How have you been this past week?
Good. Well, let's just congratulate Laura for not having to go to jury duty ever.
Well, for the next 3 years.
For the next 3 years. That feels like ever enough. Like that feels like, as far as we're concerned and the podcast listeners, like we're good on that for a while. But yeah, I mean, I can kind of relate to just like a lot of things going on. And, I think that part of why I wanted to make this podcast so like broad and like broad ranging is like really it's about us and what we're up to. So it's never I will always bring things back to human design. I'll find a way, you know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that that's what is primarily on my mind at all times. I will say probably from October 2023 to like end of May 2024, it was like a fucking human design, like just absolute absorption show. But as I've moved into the summer, like other things have become more prioritized. And, the things that have become really apparent to me as I'm, moving through this kind of period in my life, which I would call like this extreme healing phase for me, is that like the whole premise of human design, everything that's true about it, like there needs to be other things that are addressed before we can get to the nuances of a lot of things. And that's not to say that's not true necessarily for people who've understood their design from the gate. But for those of us that already have these mental frameworks about how life is, and also these patterns of behavior as far as what we consume mentally, physically, and otherwise, like there's so many things that need to be addressed first before we can actually begin living it, which is why the deconditioning process is 7 years. And I'd argue, of course, that like it could be far longer than that. I think 7 years is like the minimum if you're doing everything that you can be doing. But I think that, ultimately it's a longer process of consistently not following old patterns of behavior and expanding your consciousness and awareness. And so it's almost like, in a sense, like we're trying to move towards being able to actually understand what it really looks like to be a differentiated in our unique differentiation. Now, of course, whether or not we are self or not self, like our inherited or our inherent characteristics that have come through to us based on, the planetary motion, like those are ours. And as much as ourselves will reap our true selves will reap the rewards of being correct, like our not selves will have their own kind of sour flavor of incorrectness. And so, wherever it is, whether we're not being self or we're being self, you're going to be able to pull human design into it. It's just a matter of, I would say all of the planet, less like maybe 0.0001% of people are, densely outside of themselves. They're in the Maya. They're in their own mental frameworks. They're nowhere near what it means to be self. And so we're in a very dense framework. Again, why I'm going back to, there's a lot of things that need to be addressed for human design to be more than just a beautiful framework that we love to study with our, with our active defined brains. But, to actually get the fruits of it, I think like we're not necessarily, when I say we're, I mean collectively, we're not close yet. Lora, I'll take a breath so that you can say something if you'd like to say anything. Otherwise, I have other things I want to say.
Well, I feel like what you said begs the question, wouldn't human design be the methodology in which we are actively deconditioning? Like they say that with your first reading, you're not indoctrinated, eh, introduced. That's not the word either. Whatever word it is, fill in the missing blank with the word that I cannot think of. You're exposed to the terminology that starts to begin the 7-year cellular shifting process. And just by being exposed to human design and understanding how it is that you are, like that starts the process of your deconditioning. I don't know. What you're saying feels very ego center. Just like there's stuff to do. There's a point that we're trying to reach. We're like, we have to succeed in the not that you're like talking in that way, but the underlying themes to what you're saying feel very undefined G of trying to improve, trying to better yourself and better your life to be your true self when really like we don't have to be great. We like going back to previous catchphrase we've shared on the podcast, it's okay to be a dick sometimes. Like you don't have to be fancy schmancy, bright and shiny in your very best self. You can be a very sucky version of yourself and still see through the lens of what it is to be you through your unique awareness. There is something else along this line that I wanted to share, but I can't think of it now. Um, yeah. What was it? Maybe it'll come back to me. But just, yeah, the idea that you don't have to improve.
Well, yeah, and I absolutely, like, whether or not that is how it sounded, that's not my intention behind what I'm saying. So what I really am meaning is that when we're deconditioning, and 4% of 4%, so there's nothing that can be done, and there's people who the cellular transformation will begin on that will not complete. And it's not a matter of being better or being worse, just to give like some color, or I guess a better framework to what I'm saying. It's a matter of being self versus being not self. And that's, to me, like, I like to think that being self is better because it, I think, has less suffering involved. But that doesn't mean a lot of times what the not self is the drive for improvement. Now, what my point really was, which I can go deeper into, and I will, is that there is things outside of human design that we need to start looking at, bringing the light of our conscious awareness to within ourselves and within our lives to start to unravel it in order to get into like a kind of finalized deconditioned state. Again, 4% of 4%, like we're not all going to be able to do it. And the likelihood, like I always have that awareness with what I'm saying. And I think that, I feel like people think I say things definitively when that's never the way that I mean to say them, but right-minded, unconscious mind, I don't know how it's going to come out. But nonetheless, there's this kind of thing that Ram Dass, who was a seeker of knowledge, and he was kind of on the searching for enlightenment, if you will, but he calls this thing that's relevant and relatable to what I'm trying to get across, that people have, that's called their mind nets. And that people basically walk around with these mind nets that are casting a projection externally, and they're creating their reality internally. Now, I don't mean that in the terms of manifestation. I mean that in the terms of whatever you put your awareness on shines a light onto that thing. And so if you are constantly aware, or you have a thought that rushes through your mind, and we know from all of our conversations that your mind is just a conditioned framework, that you have been conditioned by, from the gate, from social, cultural, and familial background kind of things. You have a conditioned framework. You have a thought that comes through the framework. And what we do as humans who are conditioned is we look at that thought and we start identifying with that thought, right? And so from there, we're not manifesting our lives in the manifestor way. We're giving attention, awareness, life to that thought that we're having, and it is then growing legs because of that awareness. And so that's how the whole you create your reality thing comes to be, in a sense. There's a lot more to it, but it's a kind of a basic understanding. And so people who have really, really intense mental frameworks are walking around stuck within their own mental framework. It can be so expansive, even the mental framework, that they don't realize that they're stuck inside of it, or that they think that they've dug their way out, but they're still inside of it. And so when I say there's things that need to be done, there's a lot of basically stuff that needs to be done insofar as unraveling the mental framework, because you don't even know that you're inside of it. And sometimes that requires you to look at the cultural conditioning that you have. And that's something that I want to talk to a little bit later, because we live in a patriarchal society that's conditioned us, all of us, masculine and feminine type people, like all the same. And then, of course, we have our familial framework. And then there's, things that happen to us within life that's given us a framework and a set of beliefs. And so, when I say like it's not just human design, it's that we're moving outside of human design to see the framework so that we can dissolve it. We can kind of allow it to just be a thought instead of putting our awareness onto the thought. And this is where I think, where Ra has always talked about, like, you can't identify with the mind. You can't identify with the mind. You can't identify with the mind. But like, people think that they're not identifying with the mind when they are. And those are the layers that need to come down. And that can't just necessarily happen by looking at human design charts or talking about human design. So does that feel a little bit less defined ego?
Yeah. It's funny. The things you said. It's not funny, but to me it's funny. Just to backtrack, and then I have like some few for future propelling, not what's the opposite of backtracking? I don't know, like there needs to be a catchphrase for that too. The opposite of backtrack, huh?
I said sidestepping.
Like, wait, no, it's forward stepping. It's not to the side. It's just like to continue some of the themes that you were thinking of. But for the first backtrack, you said like, I don't mean to be definitive, and then at like 2 seconds later, or a second before, you said a finalized conditioned state, which sounds very definitive. And I just thought the juxtaposition of those two statements was ironic and entertaining. But that was my previous point that I forgot, was like, I don't think there's ever that final moment of like you're properly deconditioned, now go forth and be in the world, because we're constantly being conditioned. You can't stop the conditioning. You can't stop the mind. Like, you can try to not identify with the mind, but you can't ever turn it off. And to be human, to be within the Maya, to exist, is to deal with the constant conditioning forces and their implications on us, which is, them conditioning us to not be our unique true selves. because it's the juxtaposition of self and not self. You're never just self. You can't ever just be self because you are both. You are your whiteness as much as you are as your definition. But to future step, no forward step, whatever it is, I saw a very interesting post on Instagram that someone shared, which was her explaining that she saw a video on Instagram or TikTok or wherever, and she looked at the comments. And it was like something silly about like a husband not coming home when he said he would come home to his wife and his wife reacting to it. Um, and she looked at the responses, and all the responses seemed as if they were coming from the woman's side of like, he should have informed her that he would be coming late. He could have done this, he could have done that, like very uh pro the woman's side. And then she sent that video to her husband, and he's sitting next to her. He watches it on his phones. He opens up the comments, and this is like the Maya, not the Maya, but like the algorithm of Instagram or social media fixating what you see. So it's not just you with your own internal mental programming that you identify with a thought, therefore it becomes your reality. It's you interacting with technology is also doing it to you. But he opens up the comments, and all the comments are in the man's favor of like, she shouldn't be up his ass, or, maybe she should get some hobbies. Ridiculous things. And they're side by side watching the same video, and how the algorithm of the internet of Instagram thinks that they should be like, Instagram is changing their perspective because it's changing the framework from which they're viewing the video based on how other people are responding to it. So they're giving you a very select perspective of this video. And just think of that on like all the videos out there in the world that people interact with on Instagram. It's curating how we see. Therefore, it's not just that we are having our own thoughts that are curating our reality and making us identify with those thoughts, therefore, affecting how we perceive things and how we react to things and how we're perceiving other people to react to things. But like, it's happening to us, not just from our own unconscious efforts, which I think is wild. And then this also kind of further perpetuates the whole gender bias that you sort of want to get into. I don't know if that's going to happen right now or not, or later in the conversation, but of the patriarchy of just like these two significant gender roles are being not perpetrated, whatever the word is. Okay, I'm really bad with vocabulary today, but being further, uh, again, I want to use perpetuated via the way in which these videos are being shown to us and like the framework around them. Can't talk. Sorry, words not my strong suit. Sarah, you talk.
Yeah, well, no, and I mean, just to speak to the juxtaposition, Laura knows me well enough, thankfully, but like whenever I'm talking, it's again unconscious. My mind isn't always completely aware of what it's gonna
I know
say.
that's why it's funny.
Well,
That's
yeah,
why I
but
can take it with a grain of salt.
I want to qualify what you said because I don't want people to think that it is finite to me. Like it is the spirit of what I'm saying, not the letter of what I'm saying. I am not a letter detailed person. I don't have that anything about that in my design. And so everything requires for me qualifiers. Like there is a vantage point where I'm speaking from, and then I realize that I can turn the crystal and see it from another 100,000 perspectives. So, I can't get into the weeds about my word choice. It's just it's just the way that I talk. And sometimes they will sound like I'm speaking in fucking riddles basically, but I think that if you're on my frequency, you'll get what I'm trying to say without taking it like as a definitive, or taking it like basically what I always come back to is that people need to be true to themselves. Don't take anybody else's advice, don't take anybody else's information, or whatever they've experienced themselves as your way to be. So whenever I'm speaking, it's always it's very Jupiter and Gemini. It's very big and small, and not necessarily like it can't really be fit. I can't fit it in the way that I want to fit it in. So yeah, I mean, it's not really useful for me to go into my own semantics. I don't know where it comes from. Like, I don't even know where or how or when I say things.
But this is,
But
to interrupt, sorry, this is a very relevant human design side topic of right-mindedness. Like, who am I to say? Because I can't even think of the words that are appropriate to use in a given sentence. Like, I also have a right mind. I also say things without really knowing what I'm saying. And again, it's like the energetics behind the words, not the words themselves with right-mindedness. But also right-mindedness, like we can't, and unconscious minds, like we can't control what comes out of us. And I think that gives credence maybe to like the world at large and how people can get really hung up on the things we say to one another. And we forget that not everyone is left-minded. Not everyone is saying what they're saying intentionally and consciously. And I've just observed a lot of people getting upset by things that are said to them and taking it so personally when really I feel like everyone needs to be reminded that not everyone's brain and vocalization works the exact same way. Which, if you're listening to this, you're probably aware of that since you're aware of some bit of human design. So this is falling on deaf ears, or well, like not falling on the correct ears rather. But anyway, sorry, I'm gonna cut up this side topic. I just wanted to interject.
yeah, right-minded is it's a real, like, on top of already having to decondition your need to prove your worthiness with an open ego center. Right-mindedness is a real thing to decondition around, like, your conditioning in believing that you need to be logical or linear, or you get to decide what are the things that you react to. And so it's, in a sense, I like to all at once understand that the way that I say things in the moment is at the level of consciousness that I am currently at. I can't make that any different. Lora can't make that any different for herself either. Like, this is where our consciousness is at. Simultaneously know that, like, as my consciousness grows and expands and changes shape, or I guess really the right terminology would be, again, right-minded. I don't know what I'm going to say, but the right terminology would be like, it declutters the stuff that's blocking it. Like, I'll be able to say things potentially in a way that's more succinct, but I don't know. That might not happen. I might become really super conscious and still, like, talk sideways. So, more to come on that, but we'll see. But then, okay, is there anything else you wanted to say?
No, I will stop interjecting. Or
Well, I mean,
I'll try not to, but who knows? But no more on that note. But apart, I don't know if what you want to respond to the other part that I talked about.
yeah, well, I mean, the thing, I honestly just want to go into kind of this. Oh my God, it's like a thought knot. It's like a huge thought knot. You know what I mean? It's what my brain is. But I kind of want to just go into the fact that, like, the reason that I said all of this to begin with is because I'm stepping into understanding my own conditions around being a woman, around patriarchal masculinity, around patriarchal femininity, around what it means, around what health means, right? Like, me and Lora talked about this last week in our A Bone to Pick episode about how health and healing may be like a prerequisite for being able to decondition properly, or it could be part of the deconditioning process. Again, like, I don't know. I don't know. I just know that there is a lot of things where my energy and my awareness has gone towards that seems like it's not related to human design in the way that's, like, clean and I can, like, easily talk about it like a gate or a channel. But in a sense, like, it is part of deconditioning. And that's kind of the point I wanted to make, is like, I might not be thinking about human design, but as I'm thinking about, like, the patriarchal masculinity and the alkalinity of physical bodies and the acidity of physical bodies, like, it's like it still bleeds into this kind of deconditioning larger over topic, if that makes sense.
It does. Go
Okay.
forth and commune.
Okay. I'm like, okay, good. So I don't know if anybody has heard. Actually, Lora, have you heard about the topic on man versus bear?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, okay. Because, like, this has been like I wonder if for everyone in our audience who maybe has not heard about this, there was a question that was posed to women in mass about whether or not they would like to be stuck in the woods with a man or a bear if they were alone. if they, basically all things remaining equal, it wasn't like a man that they knew, would they want to be stuck with a man and a bear? And the guy who posed this question, which is funny that it was a guy that posed this question, basically asked it thinking that they would say man, and kind of like almost unilaterally, like the women chose bear. And I'm laughing about it, but it kind of belies like a deeper issue that's happening. And it's not, this is again, like for me, what I am uncovering, especially because so much of my not self pursuits have had to do with romance and understanding men in order to understand romance, in order to be someone who is able to, be a female in relationship. So much of my pursuits have, especially as a split definition too, on top of that, 36-6. I mean, 6 being my personality earth, which is literally about like mating and partnerships and that. Well, I don't know if it's partnership, it's mating basically. So like this topic of relationships and how they have kind of been constructed within the culture that we live inside of has been something that has always been high up on my mind and in my not self, like one of the literally the most important priority. Like we are as women like schooled to pay attention to what men are doing, to defer to men, to think that men's hobbies are important while not considering ours is important. I mean, there's all kinds of things that have happened in our particular society because of the gender that you were assigned at birth. You don't get to choose this, but there are things that have happened as a result of it. And the things that I'm like, as I start to deconstruct some of the stuff within myself, and again, it's not like I'm sitting around thinking about it, but it's like little like moments of like this like melting off of the way that I used to think are kind of coming through, because I'm starting to realize that the way that men are conditioned, like how different completely it is to the way that women are conditioned, how men are not allowed to really inhabit their own emotionality, how when they are not allowed to inhabit their own emotionality, what they end up doing is taking their emotions as fact instead of realizing, like, so basically, like, they will, for an example, this isn't all men, this is just an example of what might happen in a relationship. A woman could have a feeling about something, and the man then basically objects to her feeling and says, I have a different feeling about that. But he never actually goes down to the deeper feeling that's going on there. And so his feelings, quote unquote, are always a reaction. They're never true to the like deep like requirement of self-reflection to get to like the cause. And so men don't necessarily take their feelings as like just what they are, as women are made to do. And also we just do it more naturally, maybe because of, I mean, I don't exactly know if it's just conditioning or not, is what I'm trying to say. But they're, because they're not really allowed to have feelings, it's not considered a masculine thing. When they do have feelings, they take their feelings, they don't label it a feeling, they label it a fact, and they kind of move through their lives in that way. And there's so many different things that have come out of this argument that have just like blown my fucking mind, to be honest with you, just about the nature of the differences between men and women and how much more emotionally evolved women are because of their capacity to self-reflect on the feelings that they're having, simultaneous to their need to understand men. Whereas for men, I think some creator said it's elective for them to understand what's going on in women's emotional worlds. They don't have to do it as a kind of way to survive within the patriarchal structure. And it's akin to like being in water. If fishes don't understand they're in water, men don't necessarily understand that they're inside of patriarchy because it's so a part of the way that they live their lives and inherent to them. And they're in the power position in a sense. There's a lot to be said outside of that. that they end up just it never really needing to do a lot of the internal reflection that women do. Does this leave men at a disadvantage for deconditioning? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But it is something that it has helped me in a way understand my own need or my own perceived need in my past life and in my like all of my relational comings and goings, why all the relationships have happened the way that they have. And it's also helped melt away my need for partnership. It's not to say that like I think men are just as, nobody's benefiting from being deeply conditioned by a society that doesn't value them. It isn't, I mean, except for the program. But like no individual is benefiting from it. And so having the like just realization like, oh shit, like men are conditioned to be men, to focus on themselves, to think that their lives are and their hobbies and what they're doing are important, and women are an elective and they're not really real and their internal lives aren't real. And women are conditioned to be orbiting around men like little moons and paying attention to every little like breath that they take and focusing on the man's hobby instead of cultivating their own in a lot of cases, especially in more older school women. And it's given me like a freedom out of needing again to like have relationship or to seek relationship, with my open identity center. That's been such a big thing for me. But now I'm like, if this is the way that, men cannot see my emotional life, if the average man, which it has been my experience, the average man has not been interested in my emotional life, and this is my piece of the fractal pie. Like I can't speak to everything at large. I will never be able to. But if in my experience, like the men have not been interested in my emotional life, and it is valuable to me for someone that I am dating to be interested in it, then it's very unlikely that I'm just going to randomly bump into some man that is interested in my emotional life just all the time. And so looking around or waiting around or thinking that, a man is going to come in and like that's going to change things, like that has been dissolved within me. If there is somebody that comes along and is interested in me and my mental life, in all of the aspects of self, in my true self, right? Not just in me as an object, not just in me as something to kind of, be a part of the generalized social strata of climbing up to being, whatever we're supposed to be in this world. If they're looking at me as a real thing, then that's a man that I'd want to, potentially date or be with. And everyone else is kind of just stuck in their conditioning. And so it gave me such a perspective on relationships that I've never had ever, 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 ever. It's one of those moments that like it didn't break my brain. It dissolved so many things from my brain that I had been living under the assumption of, when I realized that this is kind of the way that they're conditioned. And again, it's not their fault. And there are amazing men that are out there all over the place, but it's not the average, because that's not the way that the average male is conditioned. So, okay, I'll get off my soapbox.
Quick question before
Yeah.
I elaborate on my side. Have you ever dated someone with a defined solar plexus?
Yes.
Okay. Did that person also not value your emotional qualities?
He was the worst.
Okay. Just
But it was,
wondering.
but again, like it's for what it's not the ones with the open emotional solar plex or the emotional solar plexus kind of have to be aware of them, whereas the defined ones are busy suppressing their own. They have no time or space or understanding for mine.
Yeah, true. So the things that came to my mind as you were talking were thinking about physiology and how women are chemically wired compared to men. Because we as women, let's put human design aside for a second, and then we'll bring human design into the mix. Women are cyclical, like we have 28-day plus or minus cycles. And we know from experience when we're in our luteal phase, we're just more not hypercritical. We're more critical of ourselves, of others. Our brains are more scrupulous towards any faults. We take things more personally. We're just like our mental anxiety is elevated. Just like there's a lot that we have to process. And our emotions are a bit more frantic. And so we will be in the position in which we might react to something and have very intense feelings about something, and several days later, after those hormones clear after menstruation, we can see that those feelings we had were not truth because of our fluidity. We are fluid in nature. And so we can understand from personal experience that having a feeling about something does not make it automatically fact. Just because of our cyclical nature. Like we're always going through ups and downs that are filtering the way we perceive our reality because it's changing our internal chemistry. It's changing the neurology of our brain to perceive things differently. Like it is out of our control. Whereas a man, he has a 24-hour cycle. So his reality is very staccato. It is not fluid and legato like ours. It's very today's this, today's that, tomorrow is that, the next day is that. And so for him to have an experience that hormonal he has, I feel like cements it into his reality, into his brain chemistry. So his feeling or his perception about something, it existed in that day, and the next day, whole new picture, whole new cycle. Like tomorrow's in the past. Who cares about tomorrow? He had a feeling, he had an experience. Okay, said and done. Let's move on to the next reality. So that perception cements his feelings into fact. So I don't know how much of it is collective conditioning. I feel like collective conditioning is what it is because of our chemistry, because we've existed in this way for so long that women are legato, to use my music analogy, and men are staccato, more just, I don't know what the other word to use instead of staccato is. But because of our chemistry that has existed my sister says humans have been around for like millions of years because of like we're descended from primates. And this is like a question that she brought up is like, okay, at what point do you delineate humans as a human? At what point is a human human and no longer some form of our ancient ancestry? So like let's say 6 million years ago, our hormones acted in the specific way that's still existing today. Don't know if that's true, um, but we've been this way for so long that that chemistry has shaped and molded the collective to accept certain parameters for human behavior. As we've developed our prefrontal cortex, I'm assuming as humans have evolved and like become able, gain the ability to have consciousness, and to self-reflect and do all the things that humans do that make us humans, um, that has been after effect, let's say, of our hormonal chemistry. Not an after effect, but just like it came later. Chemistry came first. The birds and the bees have existed for quite a while. Like chemistry comes first, and then human awareness comes later. And then the conditioning that evolves from human awareness, and that has been shaped and molded over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Like it's been long and ongoing. It's not something that's like new, or just the fact that now we're trying to reprogram our reality and our gender norms. Like it's not going to happen overnight because we've cemented it for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years. So it's not going to change anytime soon. It's going to be a long and slow process. But just thinking about the chemistry, like I get why you said it is the way that it is. Like I get it on that chemistry level, but then let's take in human design and say, okay, actually it's the people with defined solar plexuses that are plexi. I don't know what the plural of plexus is. Plexus? Is it plex is the singular and plexus is the plural? Who knows? But plexuses, to use that word, they're the ones that are here to be cyclical. And it's the people without solar plexus definitions, primarily like the sacrals and the splenic people, that are here to be more staccato, more like in the moment, now is reality, okay, move on next day, clear slate, move on next day, clear slate, or moment to moment, clear slate. Um, and so that is, again, relatively new, like not the past 20 years or however many years, well, not more than 20, like what feminism began in the 50s and 60s. The first, well, no, pre-first wave was probably with suffragism. So early 1900s. But again, there's probably movements that have gone unrecorded of feminism throughout the years. But the whole gender fluidity thing, that is like more modern and recent. But that's also not necessarily true because I took an anthropomorphology, is that the right word, class in college. It was a writing class, side random 1156 tangent. I took a writing class in college and I did not really, I was like, my last name starts with the ZU. Like when it comes to chronology of assigning students the day in which that they can select their classes, I was last. And so I had to take a writing class and my options were limited because of my last name, because I was within the last group of people who could pick and choose what classes we could. And writing classes were limited and I saw one on gender norms or gender something, anthropology and gender, I think is what it was. And so I was like, I guess that's it. And so this is like totally side tangent altogether. But we were learning about cultures that were isolated from the collective, small islands that did not receive influence from, the main civilization. And a lot of these little pocket cultures, they had fluid gender. There are some, I don't know if it's Papua New Guinea or somewhere. I don't even know where Papua New Guinea is. Is it in Africa? I'm not sure, but like some small little island off in the middle of nowhere, they would have transgenderism within their families. Like your parents, if they didn't like the gender that your child had, like they would assign you the opposite gender and raise you differently. But again, even within that framework, they had the two main genders of like females act this way, males act that way. So even without the collective influence of like mainland civilization coming in and telling them what a woman's supposed to be like and what a man's supposed to be like, they understood that genetically, again, because it's in our chemistry. And yet within the societal aspect, the nurture versus the nature, they would influence humans to behave a certain way based on their human awareness, preferences of what they wanted their children to be like. Totally side tangent. Don't know where that came from. But where was it going before? Human cyclical nature of human design. I don't
You were talking
remember.
about the open. You're talking about the open versus closed solar plexus.
Yeah. Anyways, let's see if I can remember what I wanted to say about that. Um, you would assume that the people, human design has only been around for so many years. I went on the rant of like suffragism and this and that, and like, we've only had this new awareness for so long, but maybe really we've had it for a longer amount than we perceive. Anyways, human design has only actually been around for so long because of mutation. So since what, 1781, in which the cyclical nature versus the staccato nature is not based on your gender, but based on your aura and your energetic physiology, let's say, metaphysiology. And so it's the people who are solar plexus defined that have the cyclical nature versus not. And we don't know it, right? Most humans don't know it, which is probably why there is this gender fluidity movement happening of people not identifying with their so-called gender that is determined by societal standards, probably because their aura operates in a way that contradicts like what the societal perceptions of that gender are. Like the fluidity of being an emotional woman versus the rationality of being a logical man. Perhaps the basis of that is really like people not having the understanding of like why they are the way that they are is because of their human design and not because of their chemistry. I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
That
Chaotic, disoriented thoughts, but there you go.
I wish that again. This is like the moments where I wish I had left-mindedness because there's a lot of different things to say. The first thing is I do know that there and I can't cite the source right now, but I mean maybe we could talk offline. But I do know that there has been like gender fluid, as in like he, she, they, them kind, or the they, thems of the pronouns, in other societies like that predates ours, similar to the Papua New Guinea example, but just not in Papua New Guinea, and I can't remember where it was or what period of time it was. But thanks Lora for putting the human design kind of container around the topic.
Because you can't not see it, right? Because
well,
women are cyclical, like, but so is the solar plexus wave. It has its ups and downs. It has that time frame that it needs to understand something, just like women inherently do with our chemistry. Sorry, interrupting. I'll not interrupt. Go ahead.
that's okay. No, like I said, it's a good container to have around it. Now there's a few different things like that I've been thinking about in relationship to it all, which is that we all are inherently masculine and feminine, even though we have different literal hormones that are running through our bodies. We still all have masculine energy and feminine energy. You can call it literally, like within the hexagrams of the I Ching, the yin versus the yang hexagrams. Like we all have yin energy, we all have yang energy. Now, the problem, in a sense, with the patriarchal conditioning is it says that man, and this is very reductionist, but man has yang energy, woman has yin energy, and that's all we're allowed to inhabit. And the thing that happened with feminism, the first wave specifically, was that women wanted to take on the mantle of yang energy in order to basically be able to play on the same team or same field or same level or same whatever as men. And so they were trying to take on yang instead of like allowing what it is inherent to be feminine to be just as valued as what is masculine in our society. The problem with patriarchy is the only value that the only things that we ascribe value to are the yang centric things, right? Like moms don't get paid for taking care of their children, even though they're doing like literal service to society. There's all kinds of examples like that. And in matriarchal societies, which was also something that existed specifically in Africa, but all over the place, like those things were valued and they were honored. In our society, in this very yang centric society, they are not valued. And like I want to preface all of this by saying that like I know that this is the program, okay? Like I have my own opinions about it because this is what my chemistry does to me. Whether it be my emotional solar plexus and my ability to like mentally create concepts, whatever it is, like this is how I start to process the things that are happening external to me. But I think that there's something so important to be said about our biology. This is what we were talking about last week, me and Lora. We were talking about the fact that there is biology, that we can't just undermine the biology in favor of human design. Like we have to look at the biology too, to understand, like to be able to have like kind of a foundation for like human design, because human design is a science of differentiation, but like on a kind of more gross level, like mammals, specifically primates and then humans, have like so much of the same stuff. Like we're made out of the same shit, even though there's a differentiation that happens within that same stuff. We're all our kind of unique flower, we're all our unique type of thing, even though we're made based on the same stuff. So there's certain things that physical bodies need, despite whatever, the kind of common concepts are of human design. I don't know. I just said that. That doesn't even make sense. Scratch that from the record. But there are things that our bodies need, right? As bodies, they need like certain minerals, and Lora can get into it because she's got better logic recall than I do. But it like that's kind of it. And the thing that I am saying is that we have put men into, and men have put themselves, and women have put men, and women have put women in themselves into these boxes where, in order to be considered like the kind of cultural ideal of masculinity, you need to be all yang. There's no spaces for any of the yin to come forward and come through. And with that, this is again not blaming men, because I feel for them just as deeply, because there's a deep loneliness in their inability to experience yin-centric qualities like nurturing, care, loving connection. Like all of that stuff can get a man called gay, basically, in our culture. And, simultaneously, like with women, we have had to fit into a mold as well to be the kind of apex of yin. And, we can fall into it to a greater or lesser extent, but the ideal typically remains around this kind of ideal yin quality, of like super nurturing, caring, just easy to be around, just warm, affectionate, likable, all of those kinds of qualities. Whereas we are all these mixed things, right? We are this like huge mixed bag of things. And so, to pull the human design back into it, the conditioning around what it means to be a man in our society versus what it means to be a woman is different conditioning that needs to get broken down. It needs to get broken down nonetheless, in order to decondition. I mean, that is what deconditioning is. It's just men may be less likely to do so because in patriarchal society, the masculine energy is at the top of the hierarchy. So they're unaware of the power that they have. And so they have less of an elective desire to look into the beliefs that they hold. I have more of a desire to look into what men are thinking because I've been conditioned to do so. So it's not like it's anything to fucking pat myself on the back for. It's just like, this is what, because women have been conditioned to pay attention to what men are doing and be excited about men. But like, I ended up doing that to an extreme and like studying what like the mass, like what's going on with dudes anyway. So it's not, again, like there's no one that's right or wrong in this. There's just an awareness that what I have been seeking of this like kind of full bodied like acceptance of my nuance is really hard for most conditioned men to take on without putting me in a box, without me having to cut off aspects of myself. And vice versa, not to say that I would do that to a man anymore, but in my heyday, I probably would have. If you were showing two feminine qualities, all of that stuff, I may have just gut like level been not as attracted to you because of my conditioning. So when I said at the beginning, it's like, this stuff, I'm not even spending time studying it or thinking about it, but like this is the outpouring of everything that kind of like little moments and like sound bites have brought into my awareness that have just changed my way of looking at relationships between men and women in general, and decentering relationships between men and women in my life. So, Laura, I don't know if you have anything to say from that.
I do. First off, big capital, all caps, yes, to basically everything you said. It's funny. I feel like I say it's funny a lot. That's my whatever you say, like the first part of your sentence, your transitional bit of your sentence. It's funny. Back when I had Instagram, I had a post about this, and I'll see if I can go through my archive and share it with you because my Instagram's now empty. Haha, don't want anything up on the internet. Fifth line paranoia. But there's another like side note to like end cap when we finally get to the end of this episode. There's that I meant to bring up today. Like I had a topic I wanted to bring up today, I just totally forgot about it. So another old Instagram post, but this one was basically what you said about the hierarchy. Like my sister explained like this concept to me too back when she was studying psychology, and it was probably brought up in one of her classes of like you have all the quote unquote yang qualities versus the yin qualities, and you put them in a circle with a line down the center, a vertical line down the center, and you're saying, okay, these are all the qualities that we perceive as masculine or yang, and these are all the qualities that we perceive as feminine or yin. However, due to the patriarchy, we're going to rotate that circle 90 degrees, and there's actually a horizontal line, and all the yang qualities are on the top half of the circle, and all the yin qualities are on the bottom half. And that's how our world operates. And so again, it's like exactly as you said, like the values that our society has is on the yang, therefore creating a reality in which it's very difficult for us to embrace the yin or accept the yin in whatever gender anyone identifies with. And sort of connected to the human design bit is we can sort of differentiate yang and yin in terms of people who do versus people who wait. People who do are manifestors. Everyone else is someone who waits, and we can label waiting as a very feminine or yin quality. And of course, people who come across human design, whether you're a man or woman, you don't want to wait, right? Because we perceive doing as higher value. We perceive going and getting after things like very ego energy of just go after what you want. Don't let anything stop you. Pursue your goals. Do this and that. Like that is the ideal that we have high up on a pedestal for like what's it like to be a great human being. Someone who goes after what they want, not someone who waits and who has nothing to prove, who isn't like actively trying to do anything or prove anything. Like we're gonna label that human being as lazy, as selfish, as all these like insipid qualities that are gonna be like the bottom of the sewer according to our society and what we perceive as valuable and good versus invaluable and bad. But anyways, like whether you're a man or woman, you are receiving the strategy of to wait, whether it's waiting for an invitation, waiting for your sacral response, or waiting for a lunar cycle. And automatically, your framework that you have coming into this system is waiting is bad. I've been taught that I have to go after what I want. I've been told to just do the thing. Don't let anything stop me. Like, go after your dreams, yada, yada. And then you're automatically going to have resistance to following your strategy and authority. If you're not, I mean, if it manifests, you still have to wait because it's not the mind that's initiating, it's the body that's initiating. But all of us are going to have resistance to it and have issue with it because of what society says we should value and what we're conditioned to value. So, not just like from the men, not necessarily wanting to do the work because they've had it easier, but I mean, even just being a projector, for example, like, yes, waiting for an invitation is feminine, and yet our auras are kind of masculine because they penetrate, because they get into someone uninvited especially, and that doesn't always feel good, that penetration. So we're kind of both, or we're feminine in our strategy and yet we're masculine or yang in our actuality of like what actually happens with our aura. And so imagine like a man told he has to wait, like he's not going to want to do that because that goes against what he's been taught his whole life. And for the women who are projectors, our aura is naturally sort of masculine and sort of penetrative, and that's perceived as ick and gross because women are told that we have to be receptive. We have to take things in. We can't tell someone what to do. We have to be accepting of what they're telling us to do, as society dictates. So, of course, it's going to have resistance to our Maya and to our reality because things have been the way that they are for so long. And human design is very against that. And so, yeah, it's tricky business in a nutshell.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And it's, the thing I think it's like I had this big thought knot and I feel like I'm starting to get some of the knots out of it. So thank you for being a part of this experiment. But like the thing is like I think that men who enter human design have a very different perspective of what waiting even means as a projector.
Yeah.
Like how their version of waiting is still far more yang than a female's likely will be living in the society that we're in, because it's almost like they don't even clock the yin. They can't even accept the value of the yin. They don't even realize like what it is. Like they often trample over it. They don't understand the subtlety, the nuance that's required to kind of be in relationship with it. And so these are the kinds of things, especially because human design is so heady. And one of the things that I love that Ross said was that the mind is masculine, the body is feminine. This is something that I go back to because human design is so mindy. It's so mindy that the men who get caught up in human design, to their credit, because congratulations for finding something that's so amazing, in my opinion, my humble opinion, to them, like they're still needing to kind of decondition from the structures that they've been living within that define what even receptivity means. So it's like, of course it's only 4% of 4%. like this is like, I'm like understanding the level of stuff that needs to be cleared out. And I think to just like bring it to the, just trying to keep it human design related, but it is, in that way, it may be harder for men. And I think about Raw all the time because, Ra was basically he was basically penetrated and forced to decondition in a 10-day period. I mean, he did not have to go through what it's going to take for a man to decondition, so he's in a sense, like, it couldn't have been anyone else. Like, I genuinely feel that, but like, it's also, we're as female and people who have been conditioned to have yin qualities, but then simultaneously understand that those yin qualities in our society have not been valued. Like, I mean, economically valued. Like, there's no woman who's taking care of the home is getting a paycheck or getting valuated for how much her service should be for doing what she's doing every day. And it's fucking insane. There's all kinds of books about it. The entirety of the yin has basically been just harvested and used for masculine productivity. And it's not a part of the GDP, like, there's so many things that I could say. And this is a part of the program. We needed mind to get here. We needed mind to be the thing, the dagger, the arrow, whatever it is, to get where we are, which is basically like at the peak of civilization, about to collapse. Not collapse in necessarily like some kind of hell and brimstone way, but like, we're moving into a brand new cycle where like humanity is no longer the primary driving force of evolution. It's going to be a different type. The raves, I'm sure we've talked about it in other podcasts, but it's, these types of questions, like, it made me realize, as somebody who struggles with my own identity and understanding myself and like wanting to be authentic and truly like valuing my own authenticity above everything else, which is essentially valuing like my true frequency above everything else. Like, I realized that a lot of the things that I am are not necessarily attractive to what is considered like in our culture, like the ideal feminine role. And like, having to come to terms with that, because relationships have been part of the reason that I've been so conditioned. So it's something that like, it's almost like I had to like take a little side quest from like deconditioning, just like listening to Ra and like, doing my own little thing to kind of explore this like mental framework, to explore this like conception of reality that I'm living within. And it's been like one of those things where you're just not the same after it. It's not like you're forcing yourself to change, but like, you can't unsee what you've seen, kind of thing. So yeah, again, thank you for basically going down this freaking rabbit hole with me.
It's a very interesting rabbit hole and very relevant to our reality. So you're welcome.
It is. I think it is. I really do. I think it's a very important, because I think we're not being honest with ourselves as women if we didn't. This is, by the way, I'm sorry, I'm just going to a few other things. There's a movement called the 4B movement, which I think I talked to Lora about before. And there's this movement called decentering men. And like, none of this is to punish men, but it's just like for women to like realize the chokehold that they've had over our consciousness. Like, how much time, energy, and attention has gone towards ideating, fantasizing, thinking about, fighting with, dealing with, trying to become the ideal version of the type of partner they'd want to be with. Like, all of these things has had such a chokehold on mine personally for as long as I can remember. And so not having that as like a center point for what it is that my life is revolving around kind of gives me a new sense of what life is in a way. And like, I think ultimately will make my partnerships, whatever romantic friendships or otherwise, more fruitful and more just like nourishing, like on both ends, because I'm valuing things that are outside of what the culture has told me to value now, which is connection, which is like, it's not just about you understanding like my 3041 emotional wave. It's like my own mental frameworks about things, the things that I've learned, from being a woman in this society, like my experiences, like not just discounting them entirely because you don't think that they're relevant, which I felt like not all. There's been plenty of guys who've really valued my opinions, and I just want to shout out to them because there are plenty of them. But many men, it's like they aren't interested in my internal world, and they're only interested in, kind of the way that I look, or wanting to have sex or things like that. And so it's like given me a new standard. I guess you could call me like, I don't want to say, what is it, demisexual or like sapiosexual. It's like I'm like fully in that I don't really like, I don't really like a definition, but I understand that a little bit more than I did before.
It's like those labels are for the defined G centers to have a
Exactly.
label to identify themselves with.
Exactly. I can't go too far down that. Is there anything that you want to touch on, or not really?
Well, I said there's some other things that like aren't necessarily related that I
Okay.
remembered about. Sort of related. It's sort of related to like the masculine, not the yang versus yin. Like I don't always want to use masculine versus feminine because those kind of bring in the sex and chemistry and like that level rather than just the neutral yang and yin that's outside of chemistry. But it sort of is related to well, it's not related to chemistry. War. Sorry, can't form coherent sentences today. War. I want to talk about war, and I don't mean to trigger you, Sarah, because I know you've been sensitive to this topic in other conversations. So I'm not going to say it from like the very personal, very just like what's happening, but just very, very broad stroke, overarching astrological perspective. Um, this is me just tooting my own astrological horn in a nutshell. But I remembered posting way back in the day, I think this was probably when Uranus first entered Taurus, the prediction of war. Because if you look at historically, every 84 years, some sort of big war happens. 84, and it's usually like not just Uranus entering Taurus. I was looking at, okay, like since Uranus entered Taurus, and I think this was May 2018 or 2017, I don't quite remember which year it was. But as it happened, I was like, Uranus only travels so quickly, so let's look at what was happening historically last time Uranus was in Taurus, and then the time before that, and the time before that. And let me tell you, it wasn't pretty, because the theme generally was war and just like chaos in the world around us, which is interesting because Taurus is a very yin, feminine sign, and Uranus is a planet of revolution. But big wars like World War II, 84 years before that, it was the Civil War. 84 years before that, it was like American and French Revolution time. And I looked up even 84 years before that, and there is like some other French war going on. And I was thinking, and it's like not just Uranus and Taurus, it's Uranus and Taurus, and sort of the point in which Uranus moves into Gemini. And also during this time, there's a square with the nodes, I'm pretty sure, in Aquarius, and Leo. Like there's other astrological happenings that are very repetitive and cyclical in nature and like repeat through history that bring up these things. And so I was thinking like, oh hey, like there's war going on. And oh look, Uranus is gearing up towards the end of its round in Taurus. And we've had the Ukrainian war and now the war between Israel and Palestine and whatever. And I say it like very lightly, like war is serious. But then I was thinking, there was a lot more war that happened on our planet. And it wasn't like, yes, like we have these two big wars that are happening now that are kind of prevalent because media is telling us to look at them. However, if you look at actual history of war, it's pretty much nonstop. So, like this whole theory I've had of Uranus going into Taurus and Gemini being like some sort of not trigger, but just association, correlation, as above, so below with uh global happenings, it's like yes and no. Like yes, there's war going on and we're paying attention to it, probably because of the astrology, and that's like what human consciousness is fixated on. But so many wars have happened basically nonstop through all time, without us really knowing about them or paying attention to them, and that have affected lives. Like I probably exist because of the Yugoslavian war, um, due to like family relationships. My mother became pregnant with my older sister as the war started, and maybe she would not have stayed married to my father if her country was not at war. But because her country was at war, she could not return home to her family in safety. that wasn't an option. So she ended up marrying my father, and lo and behold, here I am. So perhaps my existence is due to war. But it's just very young. Like, war is extremely young. And I was thinking about it then as the human design side of it is 26 is the gate of war, and 26 is within my godhead, Prometheus. And it's a very young godhead. Like the first four lines are all young, I'm pretty sure. Right? The first the first gate. Maybe not. Maybe it's three. I don't know. Anyways, it's very young in nature. And so I was thinking, like, no wonder Gate 26 is very young in like the correlation to war and the youngness is there because I feel like that's a very, let's use the word masculine way of approaching conflict. You don't like or I have an issue with you, instead of talking about it rationally and making peace, no, I'm going to kill and slaughter and destroy all of your resources and take them away from you because I don't know how to communicate and I don't know how to make peace with what I have. Like, I feel upset, therefore, I'm going to get angry about it and do something that is going to make a lot of people unhappy. Um, the masculine way of approaching conflict, of not being peaceful, not being calm, not being receptive to change, going and doing. And so anyways, war and just like the way in which our world operates as a byproduct of many, many, many wars, capitalism, industrialism, all these things very much powered and fueled by war. Like, no wonder we live in this very masculine, patriarchal world because war has such severe consequences when it happens and it's such a power grip. Like, you can't evade it, you can't just push it aside and pretend like it's not happening to you because lives are ending, like resources are being taken away. Like, there's, you have to face it, you can't just avoid it when it's happening to you, when you are a victim of said war. And so, no wonder in the aftermath of that, the people who are more aggressive will survive and thrive, and then that's going to affect the populace. Sort of related to this complete tangent is otters. Oh, have you seen the hype about otters, male otters, Sarah?
No.
They are horrible, horrible, horrible animals. You think, oh my goodness, otters. They are adorable, so sweet and cuddly. No, male otters have gone through this evolutionary process in which the most aggressive survive. They will rape females, they will rape baby seals, they'll rape species that are not their own to the point where they're holding females below ground to copulate and that they kill them. Like, the female can't
Oh
breathe
my.
underwater. Like, they're horrible animals. Awful. Like the worst. And yet we perceive them to be so cute and cuddly. So now whenever I see any sort of otter, whether it's in a child's book or on TV or just like this cute little video, I cringe inside because I've read about, not seen, but like read about what they're actually capable of. And because it's these aggressive, I want to call them evil. Like, they're not evil, it's just genetics. These aggressive males are copulating with the females. It's their genes that are gonna continue to exist because all the docile males aren't not generating, aren't producing, reproducing with the females. Their docile genes are not gonna get uh, proliferated through the populace. No, it's all the aggressive, mean otters that are having babies and creating a future populace of aggressive, mean otters. And it's taken over. And now basically otters, like poor female otters, poor female otters, because they have to deal with like extremely gross, aggressive males that are going to rape them and kill their babies and then kill other babies. And it's awful. It's just awful. Sorry,
Oh my
had to
god.
share my opinion about that.
So I like, you learn something new every day, don't you? I never had any idea about this.
No, most people don't because we just assume they're so furry and cute. Oh, they crack their shells together. They hold hands as they fall asleep. No, lies, I tell you. And I don't know for how long this has been happening. Um, at what point, like these mutations, talk about like individual mutation in human design. I don't know at what point these mutations started like taking over. There's like the monkey, the 100th monkey effect
Mm-hmm.
that's been talked about in science. Like, I don't know when it started, but like they are harming other species to the point where they're reducing other species populations, like the baby seals, because they're killing baby seals and like violating them. And it's just so sad. Sorry. Sorry to burst everyone's bubble about otters and the cringe that is there within them. I apologize. But I had to get it off my chest because I haven't told anyone once I came across this information. It's just been living inside of me. And it makes me upset every time I see an otter. I'm like, what can you do about it? There's nothing to do about it. I can't do
No,
anything. It's like war. Like you're being a victim of an aggressive male otter. What to do? It's just the way the world works, sadly.
I know. Well, I mean, I'm fascinated by this. I had no idea. It's a good little fun fact to know.
Sad fact. It's not fun. It is not fun. It is horrible. Horrible fact to know. But yeah, trivia.
The otter propaganda has been so real that like we had no idea all of these years, just lying in wait they were, the males that is. But no, and I mean I take your, also just to backtrack a little bit, your comment about the 26th gate and it's like masculinity. I was just thinking when you were talking about it, like two of the gates in the ego center are Aries, one of them Sag, like all fire, air. And then the last one I think it's either Pisces or Virgo. Um
40 is
oh
Virgo.
yeah, it's Virgo. So, an earth sign, it is feminine, but it's to be, it's to be thought, or it's to be considered an interesting thing to have 3 out of the 4 ego gates being masculine fire signs. But, too, just to say what you were talking about with Taurus and your kind of prediction about war and Uranus and all of that stuff, was thinking about how Taurus has so many individual gates in it,
That's
and like
true.
how much individuality plays into revolution, because you need something to shake the status quo in order for revolution to take place anyway. Um, so an interesting, just an interesting line of thought. And just also interesting about Uranus is still one of those planets that like I'm still watching him, trying to figure out like exactly the vibe, because it's been a very interesting seventh house transit for me, with Uranus there in my seventh house since it went into Taurus, and then moving across my descendant and things like that. And like, look at me, it's literally happening right now. And what am I talking about? So it's definitely like, I mean, as far as the history of it goes, I think, oh man, it's been a while, but there's a book called Cosmos and Psyche, which talks about the cycles of like the major outer planetary cycles, that might be worth looking into if you're interested in any of the kind of cycles that Laura was talking about, especially as it has to do with war and things like that. Um, he's a really smart and dope dude. So, I would say he's like one of the best like people that studied astrology and like also mixed it with just like the facts of what has happened in history. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said, because again, like I know that this is the way that the program is moving. I know that nobody has a choice in the fact that it's moving in this direction. I know that we're moving towards all rightness, aka the raves, aka yin, like that we're moving towards that very rapidly. It feels like it's getting faster and faster. And what seems to be happening as we move towards this more really, and I agree with Laura. I don't like using the word masculine and feminine because they're so highly charged, and they really make people like, they might like get really like sensitive about them, when really it's the yin and the yang is just as fair of a way to describe them. It's just, people don't necessarily all like look at it that way, but I like using yin and yang better myself. And, as we're moving kind of rapidly towards this period of time that's going to have the yin, it's like we're hitting a peak with the yang, the mind's ability to understand itself. And so we're having this experience, or I'm having this experience of like realization, line one, you know, we're in a line one period too, realization after realization about this, that, the other thing, our health, our wellness, just the duality of all of life, the way that things work, the way that I work, you know, all of this stuff that like we never had access to. Like when I said this is the peak of civilization, it's because we're like we're being given information that like no one ever has had. Like this is fucking crazy. Really, truly. Not just with the like the ability to understand it from the human design perspective and having this information, but like all of these doctors who are studying things in a more, again, because science and medical science specifically, like they also have not included the yin in a lot of their frameworks, right? So like we're understanding medical science differently, we're understanding medicine differently, we're understanding the body differently. One of the things that I wanted to bring up for this episode was that so right now I'm on a raw fruit and vegetable detox. And it's because I'm trying to make my body more alkaline, because if we're getting really, really simple about biology, there is alkalinity and acidity, and like high acidity in your body creates basically stagnation, inflammation, backed up lymph fluid, like the whole nine. And it needs to be pulled out. It needs to be balanced. And so we could look at acidity like yang and alkalinity like yin. You know, there's these things where we can see this balance out of whack everywhere, you know, and it's a far simpler approach than being like, oh, my adrenals are messed up, and so I have to look at this, that, and the other thing, and I have to take this at 12 o'clock, and then I have to take this at 4 o'clock, and then I have to take this before bed. Like, it's like, how about you just alkalize yourself and make yourself more like balanced correctly for your physicality, and that might get rid of some problems. Now, I'm not saying that that's the truth. I'm saying that's, you know, currently the avenue I'm going down, but it's just another place where like things are becoming more obvious instead of trying to like dissect things to such a point that we lose ourselves in this kind of mental craziness where we can't actually see the forest for the trees anymore. And we're so busy thinking like, how do I heal Hashimoto's? How do I heal this? How do I heal that? Instead of being like, how about we just like go back to the basic chemistry and try and like balance our physicality out to that. Now, again, I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything other than what's correct for me. So this is just the approach that I've been currently taking after my many other approaches have not yielded me the results that, you know, I, as health-wise, was hoping for. Like I have to remind everyone that like I'm not physically, like I'm not at peak health right now. And so I have I'm really doing a lot on that side and that end, like because there's all kinds of irritability and insomnia and shit that I have to deal with just on the regular day to day because of this. And so, you know, even some of my conversational topics like may be fueled by that, and it is what it is. You know, I just am where I am. So, Lora,
That's all.
That's all, folks. Okay, well, I'm trying to think. No, I wanted to talk about man versus bear. I want to talk about.
All right, man versus bear. We
No,
went on a tangent.
no,
Right? No, we did, right?
Could you imagine if I never actually hit the point? The point is just like that it's brought like a lot of awareness into this particular like subject matter for all parties involved, I think. And yeah, it's again like I love I love men and women equally. I don't think one is better than the other, but you know, I still have to deal with kind of the inherent constraints that we live in within this society. And I like to talk on them because I conceptualize, like that's my brain for you. But it's not I'm not telling, I'm not trying to be like, point my finger and shame men and you're bad and whatever. Like, this is where we're at. Like, I'm accepting it, looking at it, being critical about the way that I live my life based on the beliefs that I have around it. I think everybody should, live their own kind of truth about how to come to terms with their own sets of beliefs. So it's not a man versus woman thing for me. I just want to say that. And then, yeah, I just wanted to talk about the mind nets, which we talked about in the beginning, and then alkalinity and acidity, which we talked about. And Lora, you're good. You got everything covered.
I hardly had anything to begin with, so yes, I'm good.
Okay. Well, last week you had a list. This week
I did. Yeah.
Okay,
We
good.
take turns.
Unconsciously without coordinating, mind you.
Yes.
But okay, sweet. Well, thank you guys if you stuck around for this. It has been, again, like where are we right now? I'm always just like shocked at where the consciousness field has brought me. So hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, that is all. If you want to connect with us, we're on Instagram at at Projector Stories. We're on Facebook at Projector Stories, and we are on YouTube at the Projector Stories Podcast. And then obviously wherever you're listening to this podcast, any of those streaming platforms, drop us a line. We'd like to hear from you. Otherwise, we will catch you next time.
Thank you for listening, everyone. Catch you on the flip side.